Welcome to With You Podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And we really have not prepared for today.
Sometimes we really think of a topic and we write an outline or sort of somewhat some things we want to talk about. Today, we are walking into this completely blind.
Unknowing.
So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, walking into the unknown.
We actually asked our daughter for an idea of what would you like to hear us talk about.
That's
and
right.
this is what she said. She said she's living in a time of her life when there's a lot of future in front of her and not a lot of answers.
That's right.
A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. So we're going to kind of riff on that, like knowing the unknowable or not knowing what is unknowable.
Yeah.
Living with mystery, ambiguity. How do we live with that in our world where we like answers?
I know.
We like plans.
You've gotten really good at living in the unknowable. Like,
I know.
Presenting
I have grown.
with me is always like, where are we going? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I'm like, trust me.
It's probably just 32 years of being married to you has helped me live with the unpredictable, the unknowable.
But I don't think that's helpful to anybody because no one else is going to live with me for 32 years.
No, but we all have our different opportunities for practice.
Yeah. And do you put yourself in positions where there's a potential for not knowing?
I think that's a way to grow at it, to stretch yourself. We've talked about that with just being uncomfortable, being outside your comfort zone. And that's the way we can grow into being more okay with that. Same with the unknowable.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten better at that, just living in that place of I might never know the answer, or I might never know why I'm here or where I'm going. It sounds so
Or
like
why? Yeah, it's like, oh, well, it's way out there.
yeah, way out there.
Well, and I think I try to teach this a little bit because so in therapy, ideally, you know the process, but you don't know the outcome. So families come to me and I say, I can help you do something different. I have no idea what's going to happen. And they come back, which is remarkable. But I think it's a falsity that we think, oh, if I do everything, I'm going to get this. And there's a certainty in terms of the outcome that I really don't think is there. I mean, I think some things work that way, but therapy doesn't. There's so many variables.
I love to live my life that way. I love to have step A, step B, step C equals, this result.
Yeah, that's why you're not a therapist.
That's why I'm not a mathematician. I mean, it works that way in math and certain other areas of life, but not in birth.
No.
Certainly not in birth.
Because you live in that space of
I do.
Not knowing when the phone's going to ring, not knowing. I mean, not just living with me, but our life the last 10 years has been improv.
Yeah.
Because we go out, we'll be out with friends. And if there's a birth brewing, we don't know. And do you remember when you first started going to births, like your whole world would stop because you'd be waiting with anticipation. And the not knowing was this pause.
Right.
Like you missed out on a lot of things and it wasn't sustainable to live life that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard living in that middle ground of not knowing what's going to happen next, how soon, how long I'm going to be gone. I've practiced with that a long time, which is another reason I'm more uncomfortable with mystery because birth is always a mystery. People who study it can still never say exactly how it starts, how long it's going to last, what the outcome's going to be. So I've gotten comfortable with that in my professional life and also in teaching families how to be okay with that because it's the same way raising children. We don't know what kind of children we're going to get. We don't know, everything about them and how they're going to turn out and how they're going to respond to things. What else do you think is something in our world or our life that's unknowable?
Where things are going to go in the U.S. politics right now.
Oh man,
I've been watching the news, and it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so I think not knowing is also living in that unpredictable space. And as you were talking, I want to come back to other places. That was just a kind of funny throwaway, but thinking about, there's three responses, I think, to not knowing. There's you wait, there's kind of a pause and you wait to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was the early career. Like,
Yeah.
I have to
Well,
wait.
I think that's where our daughter is a little bit too. I
Yeah.
mean, she's doing things, but I think you feel frozen sometimes of just, I'm waiting because something is next, but I don't know the answer. I don't want to move in the wrong direction. So a lot of people freeze, I think.
It's the not knowing of, sometimes it's the not knowing of, I don't know what's going to happen out there. But the other not knowing, I think, like with Annika, with our daughter, is I have so many choices in front of me. Once I take a step and choose, I start going down a path that negates any of the others. And I think young adults get paralyzed with too many choices, that they don't know kind of like what's my call or what's my purpose or what's my direction. And so then there's a freezing that happens, that you're not making any choices.
Right.
So I think that the not knowing can lead to kind of this freezing, waiting, not making any choices. I think the second response is control.
Well, you looking at me a funny way.
You're not controlling, but you do like a sense of control. Like that's a coping mechanism for not knowing.
Yes.
It's just like, let's make a list. I know, like when you can't sleep at night, it's, you'll roll over, let's make a list.
I know. I will own that. And that is a coping mechanism for feeling like I have control over something, or I can cross this off when it's done. It feels like I'm moving in a direction, or I'm accomplishing something.
Yeah. You like, here's the knowable, here's what I can do. And so I'm going to just like throw myself into that. Or I try to overmanage. So like in parenting, I think we kind of played with all three of these. We tried to wait, like, let's see what the kid does, and be responsive to the child. Yeah. Other times we were pretty structured, and it was like, we're scared about not sleeping, and so we're going to start a sleeping program.
Yeah.
to force this child to sleep.
Yeah.
Because it was it was the unknown of, are they ever going to sleep? Are we ever going to sleep? And so grabbing on to more prescriptive type of things. And I think a lot of us do that. So when it's like our daughter, I'll wait and see what happens, but you need some motion. But I think if you go too far that way, you're micromanaging things. It doesn't work well with your spouse. I've tried.
What, micromanaging me? I don't think you micromanage anything.
No, ever. That's not my go-to.
No.
I'll just wait.
No.
But there's that control issue. And then the third way I think that we respond to unknowing or not knowing is this idea of, I will live the best I can and see what happens, and what comes before me, then I'll respond to. And it's kind of a meditative almost. I'll do what I can, and I'll let go of what I don't have control of and see what happens.
That's the ideal, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of what I teach people in birth, is that we can take charge of the controllables, or move in a direction of understanding what our not our plan, but our preferences, our hopes are, and release the rest. Releasing the rest is the hardest part, I think, for most anybody.
Yep.
But I think that's a good in between of not completely freezing and waiting for life to happen to you, or living in fear, or just rejecting the possibilities, or trying too hard to get all the balls in motion, which is also one of my fatal flaws. I'll just go in a lot of directions.
Yeah. And having to wait on others to respond. So I know that's been our dance. Like, you just rather do it than wait to see if I'm going to step up, or if I have something that's similar plan to yours. Right. But I think a lot of marriage conflict comes out of that, or relational conflict comes out of that. Like, you have an idea of how you want it. You don't know if I'm going to step into the space. And so now you have to decide, am I going to wait? Am I going to do my part and then see what happens? Or am I going to just force the issue, either keep all the balls up myself, or set it up that it's really uncomfortable for me not to do what you want me to do. Not you personally.
Yeah, this is getting feeling like you want to go in a relational direction.
Well, but I think that's a lot of what drives us in relationship. is that. So you asked me, going back, you asked me what not knowing things kind of come up for me. And I guess I'm in a season of life, like a lot of my friends have been having things happen with their dads. And so whether it's dementia, death, chronic illness, kind of the generation we're in, there's ending well.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And so thinking about people I love, what do endings look like, and what time do we have left, and how do we live in that space of not knowing? So that's a big one for me right now.
Yeah. Ooh, I got serious real quick. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I know.
but it's on the
but
forefront.
just like birth, our end of life is a very unknowable thing.
Yeah.
As far as the timing and the how, and we are in that phase of life when our friends are getting older and having illnesses. Our parents and our friends' parents are kind of nearing the end stages, and it leaves a lot of big question marks about how you navigate that with love and not fear, and
Yeah.
not adding anxiety to your own life, and make different choices.
Yeah. And kind of stopping, like, do we just stop everything? Let's not do the podcast anymore and just travel and see parents or see friends' parents, or do we continue to live, but we try to find ways because it's important to us, not knowing. Yeah, it's just, as we talk about this, it's like, oh yeah, that's the state, the
Right.
space
But
I'm
I
in.
think, doesn't that lean back to just living every day like it could be the ending? It's just like live every day well
Yeah.
and release the not knowables. Because part of that is like, oh, let's drop everything and go visit the people that we're going to miss when they're gone, is partly a controlling thing too,
Yeah.
of grabbing on to things that we are afraid we might lose.
Yeah. Holding tight to
Holding
things.
tight.
I do like, in theory, the idea of living each day like it's the last. And yet it's
That's
hard.
exhausting.
It's hard. Yeah. And it's hard to live in that space of, like, I think psychically it's exhausting too. And so there has to be some kind of denial and fantasy, like, oh, this is always going to be this way. It's what gets us through. So I don't think that's bad. I think that kind of fantasy life, that denial, on some level, denial of death, denial of fragility and ending, is important. Otherwise, it is hard to live in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that balance, I think, is good. Some days, I think, when there's not as much pain, I have better days of doing that. And
Yeah.
then other days. How about for you, when you think of not knowing? Let's move from my death, despair, and
Yeah, your dark spaces.
dark cloud over my head.
I mean, when I think about it, I think about our faith too, because there's a lot of discussions we have with people who are Christians and people who are questioning our faith, where I feel like there's a difference between believing and knowing some things about our faith. And I'm okay with the not knowing. There's certain parts of it that I believe wholeheartedly with my heart. But I'm okay with not knowing the how, because there's so many ways that Christians categorize themselves based on small differences, or maybe they would say large differences, I guess, in the way we play out our faith.
Yeah.
I just kind of, I want to release some of that and think that it's really hard if different groups say they're 100% right about these things. And then there's so much disagreement that we're just so, fractioned. Is fraction the right word? We're fractured. We're separate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's some things that are unknowable.
Yeah.
Things about heaven and that that is talked about in the Bible, but we don't have the details.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you don't have, you're one of the most curious people I know. And I think sometimes, like, being comfortable with not knowing, there's an assumption it means it's like Pollyannish or just pie in the sky. And that's not you either. So what you're talking about is like, all right, I know, on some level, I know what I can't know.
Right.
I at least know.
I'm aware that I can't know everything. And that
and
goes
might not
for
have access to it.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't believe it's true. And the same goes for science in our world. People have had a big push for, like, yay, science, which I totally agree with science, but science is the attempt to understand
it's a theory.
a universe that is really vast. And a lot of it is, I think, unknowable or just mysterious, not controllable by us. And I'm okay with that. Like, I just love being delighted by new things that we learn about the stars and about the things that live under the sea. But I think we're never going to know it all.
Yeah.
And understand how things work, or even our own bodies, So I think there's just so much that's unknowable, but I think we work really hard to understand and control everything in our world.
Yeah, I like a baseball metaphor, surprise, surprise, about kind of the philosophical ideas of not knowing. There's people that think they know, and they're the umpires. If you're not familiar with baseball, there's umpires that call balls and strikes. The position that you can know everything is the umpire says, I call them as they are. There's no flexibility. Like, the ball comes across, it's a strike or it's a ball. There's the next one that's a little more flexible. I call them as I see them.
Okay.
That there's a pitch, it happens, and I'm going to approximate. Because I'm limited,
I'm going to do my best. I could be wrong, but I'm still making the call.
And I'm approximating that this is a strike based on all the information that I have. Now, was it really a strike? A lot of us fans will argue, no, you're blind, horrible umpire. And then the last one is, I call them they're nothing until I call them.
Okay.
So the umpire says, you can throw the ball and I don't call it. It's not a pitch. It doesn't exist. And so it's the social constructionist idea that reality is co-created between us. And we agree the umpire has this power. And so in calling it, that creates reality. So there is a reality, we can know it. There's a reality that we can approximate, or there's a reality that we create. Yeah. And not knowing falls in there. And I think you and I fall in that approximation kind of idea. We do our best. We realize we're limited. We're fallible. Just like this room, our kid's dog experiences this room so much different than us, right? Like, we think we know the reality of our podcast studio. That dog comes in here and experiences it completely different. Sorry, yeah. I'm getting on a lecture mode. Yeah, I see it in your eyes. It's just like when we're at a dinner party, that look right there, that's at a dinner party that's like, hey, let's let other people talk, David.
It just was spurring other thought. You saw my eyes go a little...
Yeah, flutter.
Because it was making me think about other things.
Yeah, well,
because
when
you talked about the dog's perspective, I thought, that's one of the things that makes me think there's things I don't know. When you said we're fallible, like when we find out an insect can see, I don't know, umpteen more colors in the world than we can. Amazing. It makes me realize there's so much more going on that I don't know, because I'm created to take in what I take in, and I can expand my knowledge. I'm always trying to learn, but there's always going to be somebody else who sees colors differently or hears music differently, and I can't experience it in the same way. So that doesn't mean it's not reality. No. It's just unknowable to me.
But it means we have limits, right? We have sensory limits. And I think, especially here in the States, we think, man, with just enough effort, we can do anything. And our international friends have said, you're so hopeful. You just believe anything can happen. And I think they have a better sense of, no, people are limited. Yeah. And David and Tara, you're limited.
I think that is kind of unique to our culture, is feeling kind of invincible and kind of like we have a lot of resources and we can, I think that's pretty uniquely American.
Yeah.
At least from what we've heard from friends around the world saying, you guys are so optimistic. You think you can solve all the problems. You're happy about it,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we do want to think like if we just work hard enough, we can find a solution, or we can fix that, or we can fix other people's problems. Yeah. And that gets really dangerous.
It does. And because it makes assumptions that aren't true. Like with the bugs, they see more colors, and the dogs smell different things. And there's so much more to reality that we can only approximate. I was reading in, I think the journal Nature was talking about negative time, like things that happen before they happen, and that the idea of time isn't what we think it is. And so what does that mean for physics? And it kind of throws everything, all our theories, with new data and new measuring and it throws our theories
Right.
into whack of like what you thought happened. And it might not affect us right now, but it could affect computing. And that's
Yeah.
going to affect us.
Yeah.
So,
So our own definitions of reality that come from great science can all get turned on their heads at
yeah.
any moment. And that can be really unsettling
Yeah.
if you have to have control and knowledge, all the time. So I think we have to live in this world, we have to release some of
Yeah.
that. And it's kind of freeing. It's kind of like there are some things I feel like are very helpful to know and
Yeah.
understand, but having an open hand and being willing to hear other points of view or be willing to let that one go if things change. It's a growing edge for most of us.
It is. And it's great systemic ideas because we have a balance, right? We have a theory, we have an assumption, and then it gets thrown out the window and it makes us all stressed out. And we have to find a new way of doing it. If we're flexible, we're able to work, or if we have had different experiences, it gives us new ideas. But if not, it's anxiety producing. And that's the beauty of like, are we willing, as you started saying, are we willing to put ourselves in spaces and in places where we don't know, that our coping strategies don't work, that allow for something new to emerge? We have to tolerate. So there's flexibility, and then there's the risk tolerance or the emotional tolerance.
Well, I was going to ask you what you think about that because, like you said, my not note taking, my list making, and tendency to want to control and understand my tasks in my environment is partly a response to feeling out of control. Or growing up, I had a lot of change in my life, so it was helpful for me to define and understand some things. For other people, I think that tendency to control is a bigger trauma response.
Yeah.
And that might be coming from a place where they really need the control in order to survive. So, or at least to manage living in that space.
Yeah, it's a coping strategy.
Right. So what would you say are some good techniques to increase your flexibility and your resilience if you're coming from a place where that's hard?
Yeah. So, oh man, so many ideas. And I'm going to tell you a story first before I come up with the solutions. Of today, we were talking as a faculty in the marriage and family therapy program. And one of the faculty members said, it seems like the people you hire, Van Dyke, are all people like they've navigated their trauma by being hyper aroused, that they are detail oriented. They really work on getting things done. They try
so they're more in the action oriented when they're overwhelmed.
Action when they're overwhelmed. And they're like, that really works well for you because you have people that are over functioning because that's what they learned through the pain of life to do. And I was like, busted. That's how I get through life, is both over functioning and competent people in my life. But it is a response to the difficulty that happens. So there's two responses. There's all the people I hire that are amazing,
or the person you marry,
or the person I married. That the difficult life experiences, your nervous system all went into arousal. Like, let's get things done. And
you need to explain that because that word to a lot of people isn't on the window of tolerance. I know where you're coming from with that, but just explain that.
So there's an idea called the window of tolerance. And so if you think about like a red bar on the top, a green bar in the middle, and a red bar on the bottom, the green
on a graph,
like stacked, and the middle area is your window of tolerance. It's when things happen and you can be present. You're neurologically, you're not in a fight or flight response. You're just kind of like, oh, I can respond intentionally here. And then we fall out of our window, either in an excited state.
So when we get added stress or factors that come in and
war
overwhelm us,
or
trauma
of loss, of things that just flood us emotionally, our brain, our limbic system kicks in, and it either does one of two things. It either kicks in and pushes us to let's do something, which is the fight kind of response. Our body's primed we get energy and we're primed to do something. The other is just shut down. And that's a hypo arousal.
So some people, when they have added stress, go into like, okay, I got to manage this. They get adrenaline. They're like super on fire.
Yep.
Other people are like, they
Yep,
kind of
just
power
shut
down
down.
and
And
shut off.
there's a continuum of it, right? So
Mhm.
you can, like, some hyperarousal is really good. You're generating energy, you're going. Now the danger is you burn out,
Mhm.
right? You burn out your neurological system, and you have autonomic issues and all sorts of things. And then you can kind of go way too far and get really aggressive. Road rage is a good example of there's a minor stress. Someone cuts you out and you just kind of go crazy. You rip the mirror off their car. That's flipping off the top end of the hyper
Yeah.
arousal. You can kind of be protective, kind of pull back. Those are all good things. But if it leads into depression,
So now you're talking about
the
hypo
hypo going
arousal.
low,
Yeah.
and you shut down or you withdraw, like that's the light stuff. But dissociating, just kind of not even being connected to the world, is the far end of that.
Mhm.
Or isolation. And Howard Hughes would be a good historical example. The more he got agitated with the world, he became a recluse and
Mhm.
pulled back.
Mhm.
So there's these type of things. And so getting back then, so that's the model. And I think not knowing falls in that. It creates anxiety for us. And do we get agitated or activated or list making,
Mhm.
or do we just shut down? Wah wah. That's going to be a continuum. And if we stay in the green zone, it's functional.
Mhm.
The red zone is where it becomes problematic and we can't navigate life well. What do we do? Well, the things you do in birth are amazing things to regulate that, because birth can be overwhelming physiological, emotional thing. And so you might go into some active or passive response. You bring people into their body. You make nice, safe environment, not mood lighting. That sounds creepy.
Yeah, kind of.
But you turn down the
Yeah.
fluorescence, you turn on music or whatever is
So
comfortable
turning
to
off
them.
external stimulation that makes them more heightened.
Right.
Yeah.
That removes the threat, kind of makes it cozy.
Mhm.
And it might be touch, it might not be touch. Touch could be a threat. And so you have to find what is soothing to your body, and breathing, like the
Yeah.
military breathing you talk about.
And so I just want to kind of clarify what I was asking, because these are good responses to when we get out of those zones and we're activated.
Yeah.
But how do we widen the window of so how do we make ourselves more flexible so we don't jump out of
Right.
our window so quickly?
Great question, Tara.
I'm just
Thank you for getting me back on track.
Well, this isn't where we thought we were going, but
No.
I think it's interesting where we ended up, because we're talking about the not knowing and then how that is activating. It's stressful,
distressing.
And so how do we make ourselves more resilient in this world where we're never going to know everything?
Yeah, and it's practicing. So like breathing, getting into your body. And so as the stressful thing happens, it's kind of desensitization, or it's how we respond to how we do treatment for PTSD, of can you be in a physiological and neurological relaxed state? So it's breathing, relaxing, settling down, and lowering your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure, and then kind of interacting with that threat, with that perceived threat, with the not knowing in this case, of like, okay, let me get centered. And now let me think about my future. If that's what's creating the discomfort because of not knowing, that's going to build the window, because the reactivity is your body responding to a threat. And so if you can relax it and then enter into the thought process, journaling about not knowing when you're physiologically regulated, that's going to expand your window.
So it's practicing those skills more often, so that becomes more of a first line of response.
Well, you knew I had a Fitbit when I was a young clinician, and it was regulating my heart rate, because people swearing at you and yelling at you and turning on you, I'm just here to help, activates you. And being able to settle down, I can be much more helpful and not get reactive with couples now than when I was a new clinician. So
So the
experience and
Fitbit did
regulate.
what for you? It helped you look at your heart rate.
Yeah, when they
And
were screaming, dropping F-bombs at me, I would look at my heart rate and it would be like
so I
90,
guess this is
100.
like a smartwatch for those of you
Oh
who,
yeah. Apple Watch, whatever that
yeah.
might be. But it tracked my heart rate. And so I would slow things down. I could get my heart rate back down to about 60 beats a
So it's
minute.
just the awareness of like, oh, my heart rate's
Yeah.
going up. I need to settle
A
things
little
down.
biofeedback. And then I could
Yeah.
re-engage.
So I'd say another thing, because this really is the birth situation is very good sort of practicing ground for all of this stuff, because you're in a heightened state and a lot of not knowing. Another thing is social support that really helps, the kind of social support that helps you practice those things, because we can have people around us who actually increase our stress.
Yeah.
So having people around you that you really trust, that can create that safe space, that can be good listeners, that cannot reflect back to you more of that stress, the thing that you're talking about, like in Annika's case, just, anxiety about the future. If she's talking to her peers that are in the same place, they're all going to get each other more and more anxious because they're all
gasoline on
worried.
a fire.
Right.
Yeah.
So when she talks to us, I don't know, we probably sometimes heighten her anxiety because we're not as worried about it as she is.
Yeah.
We have a longer view.
Yep.
But choosing who's around you to support you can help kind of create a right environment for being able to handle the stress.
And even with us, like being helpful to Annika, occasionally you'll look at me and like, you're not helping. And so then I go do the dishes. But there's a cue of realizing if we don't even realize we're getting dysregulated or not being helpful in the moment. So yeah, social support. I mean, it's like the things we need to do, exercise and sleep. And
the really basic breathing, sleep, exercise, which we all know help us have a healthier disposition and create a better playing ground for managing stress. And yet those are some of the first things to go when our life gets busy, right?
Yeah, it's remarkable.
And also getting connected to nature. I think,
that's what I wanted to talk about. We can grab some grass. No, that's not. What do the kids say? Touch grass.
Do they?
Yeah. Someone told me that.
Take a forest bath.
Yeah, you're supposed to get out into nature. And that's been really, like, for us, not knowing and emotional regulation, us going walking at the Arboretum, I think is probably the top thing that helps me feel more congruent, more aligned, more able to step into the unknown.
Gives you space to think more clearly without the same kind of, I don't know, inputs that are coming from everywhere else that are creating more stress.
Yeah.
Just helps your whole body. I mean, there are plenty of great studies that show that our blood pressure is lower, our heart rate is in a more healthy balance, our breathing, we get more oxygen, all of that
But there is a corner of the Arboretum that gets me agitated. It's right by where the 88 comes by.
Yeah. Well, we can even find small doses, even if you just have a garden, just going out and hearing birds and touching grass, as you like to say.
That's right. Digging in the dirt.
Yeah. Because we often just walk in our neighborhood and go find a park, walk somewhere where we don't hear cars.
But there is something like at the Arboretum, it feels like you're breathing better oxygen. I don't know. It's fascinating. So this idea of having good social support, being aware of when you're agitated, doing some self-care in terms of what gives you joy, grabbing grass, of doing these, or dirt, digging in dirt, all the alliterations. But it's also, what do you enjoy doing, and how do you build that in? So like sometimes when I don't know what's happening, or there's uncertainty and unknowing, it feels like I have to work harder. And this, like for me, the thing to do to get centered is to go to a baseball cathedral stadium. But for whatever reason, all the things we're talking about happens in there for me. Yeah. This idea of being at a stadium, being with strangers, socializing, and yet watching a pastime that connects me with deep roots of who I am, with people I love, all of that just kind of resets. It's like a hard reset of my computer.
Yeah. And it's individual for each person.
Yeah. What is it for you? What resets for you? So baseball stadium for me.
Being in the sunshine. No, I was
Oh,
going to
no.
say,
We live in a place where there's no
that's why
sunshine.
life is difficult for me here. We've been over that.
Yeah.
But, as simple as getting sleep or exercise, I think that's a reset too. Often late at night is when problems seem really unsolvable or unknowable or very distressing. And sometimes just a really good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning and it all looks completely different.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of ways to reset. We still won't know everything, but how okay we are with it can change based on how kind of grounded we are and settled we are.
So I have one last thing to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Why are there numbers on a beach ball over there in our studio?
It's a teaching tool.
Oh, about what?
That's that's going to be unknowable for you.
Oh, now I'm getting agitated. Let me breathe. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I don't know how we end.
No, there's no answer. But I hope people recognized some things that they might have thought about before and maybe have some new ideas for how to feel a little bit better with things, the mysteries of life.
Yep. Try to stay in your window.
Ambiguity.
And ask questions, be curious, but also relax.